Welcome to Activate Your Power. My name is Sujata. I'm the president and CEO of Chicago Foundation for Women, and with me is
Alicia Tate, Director of Programs.
So let me first start out by thanking our fabulous sponsors, without whom this symposium, you would not be able to have breakfast, shall I just say. And the lovely tablecloths and everything else, and the chairs you're sitting on. Our sponsors this morning are the Field Foundation of Illinois and the Lenovo Foundation. Please give them a round of applause. I don't think people are in the room. So I thought I'd sort of get this started off with a little story about how I got activated. You wouldn't think, knowing me, people who knew me when I was a kid wouldn't think that I would ever do something like this, that I would ever be an activist. I grew up in India in a very sheltered home, and I thought I was going to be an academic like the rest of my family. And then I came to the US to continue my academic studies, and stayed here and decided that I was going to volunteer because I had a little bit of extra time when I was not doing research in the area of cement and cement-based materials. So I volunteered with the YWCA Evanston North Shore and Upnagar. My time at Upnagar was completely a transformative experience. It was the first time that I had a chance to see people who looked like me and were like me show amazing acts of courage, and truly it was, and then I got the opportunity to actually work there. And that truly remains for me the most transformative experience of my life to this day. So my activism was very simple. It was just taking that first step to volunteer, and I ended up volunteering in all of the departments at Upnagar, and as I said, eventually went to work there and changed careers. So it can start really, really small, and now it is my life's work. It has become my life's work to really make sure that women and girls in particular, have the opportunities to live strong, fulfilling lives in a way that I've been able to do thanks to the support I had from my family, from my friends, from my teachers, and everybody around me. And I want girls and women to have the same opportunities today. So it begins, as I said, very small. I was an engineer. I became an activist. I'm looking forward to hearing the stories of everybody else in the room today. We're going to start off with a few folks, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Oh, I need my notes, sorry. Thank you, Sujata. This is going to be sort of informal as a meeting with 500 people of your best friends can be. So relax, enjoy breakfast, talk. So I'm Alicia Tate. Thank you, Sujata. Briefly, I will tell you, I know some of you think I probably always was an activist, but actually I was just going to go to Northwestern University and get a good job. And but something happened while I was a student at Northwestern University in the early 90s. Can anyone guess what that was? Rodney King. That happened while I was a student at Northwestern University, and it was the first time in my life that I had seen that kind of brutal, vicious discrimination, racism captured on video for the world to see. And it really changed the course of my work. And I was a journalism major, but I decided I had to do something about justice. And I didn't know how that would happen, but I was fortunate to have a number of opportunities to do that along the road, in journalism, in nonprofits, in government, and now at Chicago Foundation for Women. So I think the theme of this program this morning is that there is no right or wrong way to be active. How would the young people say it? We need woke people everywhere, right? We need woke women, especially everywhere, at every level, in every venue. And so that is what this program today is about, to give you some examples of the variety of ways that women have done that. So I think that's what and to inspire us enough that then we can initiate or build on our own activism by going out into the hall after this program to the Activation Hub, where you can learn ways you can get involved from some of our fantastic grantee organizations. So without further ado, this is how this is going to work. We're going to have 3 pairs of incredible women coming up to the stage to be in conversation with each other about their activism. They're going to ask each other a couple of questions, and we're going to make them talk fast and shut them down probably before they would want to. But it's because we have so much information we want to share, and we want to have some time for your questions, and we want to have some time for you to talk with each other a little bit. So, I see the senator over there. Hey, Senator, your table is up here. Here she comes, right up here. There you go. So I'm going to introduce them briefly as each pair comes to the stage. Okay, so you with me? We good? And this is all being recorded by our wonderful friends at CAN TV. So we will use mics for all of the comments and questions, and you will be able to share this with your friends who couldn't be here. So thank you, CAN TV, for being here today. All right, so first to the stage, we're going to have Iman Hassaballah Ali, who and you can just come right on up. I'm going to come down. Iman Hassaballah Ali works on Jewish-Muslim relations in Chicago. You have her bio in your program. And Rabbi Shoshana Conover, who is Associate Rabbi at Temple Shalom of Chicago. So please welcome these wonderful speakers.
So, since we're going first, we have very little pressure, and either we'll knock it out of the water and make your jobs very difficult, or you guys will coast right in. First question is for Rabbi Shoshana. You're a Jew, and I'm a Muslim, if that's not obvious. And we've had a chance to learn about each other's faiths. What do you see as some of the common themes in our cultures and some of the goals we share?
Thank you for that question, and it's great to be with you.
Always.
So I'll just say that for me, I want to be able to ask you a similar question because I don't want to speak for you in what we have in common, but I do want to share one piece about Judaism, and then I would love for you to answer the question in what you see as the commonality with this piece. And that is that one thing that Jews know cold, no matter who they are as Jews, is the Shema, which is Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Well, it really could have started any way. Why Shema? Like, it could have started, look, Israel. It could have said, think, Israel. It could have said a lot of things. Israel's referring to the people of Israel, the Jewish people. And so why listen? And I think that the answer is that we actually have to get humble and listen. And actually listen to what's happening around us, to be able to connect to the humanity in everyone and also the divinity in everyone, and actually listen for the holiness that happens, especially when we activate ourselves.
So this is actually a really good transition to question number 2, because I think my answer to the next question sort of fits nicely within yours.
Well, so then let me ask you.
Thank you.
Iman, what role do you think we can all play, and particularly what role can women play in helping to challenge divisions between faiths such as Judaism and Islam?
So just as Rabbi Shoshana said, there's a verse in the Quran that almost every Muslim says, and it's like the stereotypical, or like not the cliche interfaith thing, and it's that God created us into nations and tribes so that we can get to know one another. And he didn't say this that we could work together. He didn't say that we could feed each other. He just said get to know one another. And that's really the step that I have taken in my Jewish-Muslim relations work in Chicago and in my participation in the Muslim Leadership Initiative, is to get to know Jews. And what I've realized is that we're just not that different from one another. And another thing, like even if you go as far as the other side, like I actually met a friend who, my column, I'll post the tweet. I have a tweet that's queued up that I'm going to send after this on the hashtag. Make sure you're using the hashtag. It's, what is it? It's activate, hashtag activate, and then CFW luncheon.
It's on the back of the program.
It's on the back of the program.
Thank you.
You just scored major points with Alicia.
Yes, you did.
Well, I work in digital communications, and hashtags are my life. So that's why I have tweets queued up. But so I have a column that's called Emansplaining, and basically I met. Long story short, you can read the column, but I met a person on a plane, and we became really good friends. And then I found out he was a Trump supporter, and I'm not. And so it's been an education, and that's that. Also, I wanted to say. Because I'm running out of time.
You just lost some of those points that you had gained before.
Well, because I'm going to post and actually my part 2 is due today. I'm going to post part 1 of the story on Twitter, so you have to go to Twitter and see it. And what I say is that, like, you know, one of the things I realized in Israel when I was there is that, like, this idea of Arab Jews, and it just blew my mind because they just seems like such an oxymoron, right? As an Arab, I'm an Arab, and not a Jewish person, that it just blew my mind. And then I realized, okay, we're fighting about a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be fought over. And if we can't discuss these things, we shouldn't tackle these big topics. Anybody here part of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom? Oh, no. Okay.
But we want to be.
not
We
yet.
want to
Yeah,
be,
not
man.
yet. Yeah,
We
yeah.
want to be.
Inshallah.
Yes.
God willing. So anyway, they don't tackle the conflict. They don't. That's one of their rules. They don't tackle the conflict. And so if, you know, 4 presidents couldn't figure it out, we're not going to figure it out. So we shouldn't argue about it.
And yet, I would say that part of what I really love is developing these deep relationships. We don't avoid issues that are really difficult. So, for instance, we actually do talk about the conflict.
We do, because we can.
And so, and I have to say that I think that for me, the goal is to listen enough and to get close enough and deep enough that we can actually have these conversations that
Right.
are really difficult,
Yeah.
but having the relationships that cross difference.
And also understanding the lens, so understanding the trauma that your own personal trauma or your collective trauma that you see the world through, and understand that not everybody sees the world the same way you do. And that's what the Muslim Leadership Initiative program taught us, is that, you know, I saw the world through the eyes of a Jew, which I'd never done before. So are we on question 3? Okay. Shoshana, another question for you. How are you helping members of your congregation, and especially as a female rabbi, and other Jews, both to support your own community and others of different faiths?
So I'm not sure if this is gender specific, although I have an inclination that this has to do with some gender specificity. So me as a woman, as a rabbi, that for me, I tend to use my platform, the bima or the pulpit, in order to be able to invite people to tell their stories. So that I don't necessarily speak for other people's stories, but I want those stories to be heard, and I want them to be heard in our Jewish community. And so we've invited people to come and speak from our bima that include Tahra Ahmad, who spoke very much about her own experience as a Muslim who is very active on campus at Northwestern as a chaplain. We've also had people from Precious Blood Ministry, youth from there, who talked about their trauma around gun violence, and then also one of the ways in which they address that trauma through restorative justice. Then we also, as a community, some of us have been trained in restorative justice circles, and we're circle keepers in the JTDC, in the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center, in ways where we're hearing stories, we're helping people share their stories, and in that way then, this whole idea of Shema, of listening, is also bearing witness, and then it's also saying that now we need to be activated to do something. We see the particular of our religion, and then to say what's the universal of how we actually get to improve this world together.
I was scheduling the tweets.
Iman.
Oh, we're wrapping up. How many minutes do we have left? 3. Excellent.
Iman, let's close with you helping us understand why all of this is so important for you as a woman, and how do you view your work on these issues as empowering Muslim women and all women?
Okay, so I did wear jeans under my skirt because I biked over here, and also I'm about to get on a soapbox. So one is that we really have to support one another as women. We can't cut each other down and sabotage one another. We shouldn't try to be men, or at least we shouldn't try to embody their worst qualities, right? There's the second tweet that I queued up was a story from This American Life about the romance novel industry and how supportive they are of one another, and how, you know, it was really beautiful, and you should listen to it. And I would love to develop a leadership program by women for everybody that embodies those qualities, like the qualities that are sort of what makes us who we are, to put that and make it for everybody. And then I'm starting to realize that my role is to help bring people together, whether it's Muslim and Jewish women, or Democrats and Republicans, Trump, Clinton, and Bernie supporters. You know, one thing I've learned about crossing boundaries and pushing boundaries as far as I can, because I've been doing that my whole life, is that we all want the same thing. We really do. Like, we all want America to be great. We all want people to be healthy, and we want people to not be poor. Like, we all want the same things, and it's just, we just have different paths to greatness. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Help me thank these women. So, Alex Goodwin, are you in this room? Yay! Wonderful. Welcome. So our next speakers are Alex Goodwin. Alex worked, and you can just come on up to the stage. Alex works as an activist and writer, and she's currently a research analyst with Action Center on Race and the Economy, and has written for BYP 100. And Barbara Engel co-founded the Chicago Sexual Assault Services Network and the Chicago Metropolitan Battered Women's Network. Let's welcome our next two speakers. And Alex, I believe you are asking the first question.
I am. Good morning. I feel like I should have wore sleeves. Yeah, everyone looks so nice. So we'll just jump right into it. Barbara, good morning. I'm really excited. You know, I'm really excited to be up here with you.
And vice versa.
You helped blaze the trail for women's leadership in domestic violence and sexual assault prevention. What challenges did you have early on in getting women involved, and how did you feel with those? How did you deal with those?
So with a captive audience, I kind of want to tell a story. And I want to take everybody back 45 years to the late 1960s and my generation's focus on exposing violence against women, a movement that I had the honor to be involved in. But I want to give you the context. So imagine this. There was no public or even private discussion anywhere of sexual assault or sexual harassment or domestic violence. We didn't even have those names. There were no magazine articles. There were no TV talk shows. There were no hotlines. There were no made-for-TV movies. There were no rape crisis centers, no battered women's shelters. There were no gender studies departments, no cell phones, no computers, and a terrifying terrifying silence existed and allowed the violence to go unremarked and unchecked. And in my experience, all across the country, in the late 60s, we were catalyzed and inspired and kind of shaken out of our complacency by the civil rights movement. We saw black people challenge the notion of a free and equal democratic America. And we saw on TV, some of us were involved in it, some of us just saw it on TV or in print, black people being beaten, being set upon by police dogs and fire hoses, even killed just for attempting to register to vote or to attend school or to sit in the front of a bus. And this very visible critique of American society and exposure of very raw racism, like you were talking about. Oh, very raw racism, and the movement's inherent bravery helped us, and I think helped us question the status quo and think about oppression. And so in living rooms and in laundry rooms, women began to speak openly about the oppression in our lives and the violence that we were secretly living with. And we had consciousness raising groups. I actually meant to bring a little pamphlet that still exists. And we spoke honestly, often for the first time, about incest and sexual abuse and rape and domestic violence. And we overcame a lot of our fears and shame, and we shared what we thought were our own very private nightmares. And we learned the most important thing, that the personal was political. And I personally had the luck to be in a consciousness raising group with, oh God, I just lost her name. The woman they just made a film about who did with Heather Booth. Anyway, we organized speak outs in public and safe places, and very brave souls recounted hostile and victim blaming responses that they had encountered when they tried to reach out for help in those rare cases. And they talked about going to the clergy and about their husband's beating, and were told to turn the other cheek, or they were asked what they had done to cause his punches. Or rape survivors who went to the police and were told they were lying, or if they knew the attacker, it wasn't really rape. And if they had been incestuously abused and had the ability to see a therapist or a psychiatrist, they were told they were fantasizing and it couldn't be true. Or if they were battered by a boyfriend, they were labeled masochists and they must have wanted the violence. So we realized the depth and the breadth of the violence, and that kept us all in fear. And it functioned as a social control of women and kept us subordinate and a racist and sexist and capitalist patriarchy. And we became proponents of a movement for radical change. And most of us were survivors. I'm a survivor. We created safe places that had not existed when we had been abused. And we healed ourselves through action. Survivors were the heart of this work. And, so what did we do? What was the activity? We made a new language that spoke our truth. We had conceptions of the abuse of power in relationships. You've probably all seen the Power Wheel, right? We created the first rape crisis lines and the first battered women's shelters and the first hotlines and support groups and healing groups and advocacies for individuals with systems that deepened the trauma. We created speakers bureaus across the country and raised community awareness. I can keep going, but looks like I might be boring you. But prevention programs, local and state and national coalitions, new state legislation in every state in the US, and federal legislation, and it's only a partial list. But we really moved this whole thing from invisibility to being recognized as a serious social issue. And in that transition, which included heightened interest from academia and researchers suddenly, and government funding, the programs that we started often began to change and became social service organizations and programs. And those programs that had the victim and survivor at its heart started losing their radical feminist intent. And we made many mistakes. And some of the mistakes, I think, the work that you're doing will probably speak to. We created silos instead of intersections. We didn't center the importance of race and class and sort of got stuck in our gender lens. And we didn't conceptualize or even work on white privilege. And we didn't promote linkages between struggles for liberation. And we're now faced in trying to reimagine what we can do to create a world that is safe for all people who are abused, and we're moving beyond the gender binaries that we got very stuck in. We just call it violence against women, but we know that it also can happen to men, that LGBTQIA, all kinds of folks experience violence and have to address it in their lives. And we also need to do something that I think you may be talking about, which is listen to the call by people of color who are really concerned that we spent so much time making this a criminal justice issue and a crime, and who believe that the abuse of communities of color and the mass incarceration that's happened since really the 1990s has made it problematic to be involved with courts and prison, and that prison isn't, in fact, a good answer. And so people are beginning to explore, in Chicago in particular, community accountability programs where they look at and try to address the kinds of harms that happen, but not take them into court or
So
end
Barbara,
in prison.
as we bring your
Okay.
remarks to a close, let's first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because a lot of us are standing on this road, but we didn't have to build it. So thank you.
It was an honor.
So now I'm gonna, in that spirit, I'm gonna let you ask some of a question to Alex to build on what you just shared. Thank you.
So Alex, BYP 100 is described as having a queer feminist lens. How does this address some of the challenges we couldn't address in the earlier feminist movement? And can you tell us what that means and give us an example or two of how that looks in your work?
Thank you. I love answering questions about the Black queer feminist lens because I get to call out the white power structure, which I think if more of our work was rooted in politics that call out a white power structure. Well, let me back up. So the Black queer feminist lens, those like words together, like at face value, probably make a lot of sense. But in theory, it's a politic. It's referring to what Barbara said, right, about the personal being political. Black queer feminist lens is very personal, and it's also very political. You don't have to identify as black or queer to hold this politic. But it's a politic that is going to challenge you. It's challenged me just within the last year and a half being a part of BYP 100 because it forces you to dig deeper into like the issues that you're trying to understand or the issues that you're organizing around. It's an inclusive politic. We understand that the needs and injustices that like black trans women or black femmes face is going to be very different than the needs and injustices that a straight black man is going to deal with. But how do we organize, or like how are our strategies inclusive, like in a way that addresses the needs and injustices of both of these things and everything in between? Because this might be a reach, but that's the only way like that we're gonna win, is that the things that we're campaigning around are inclusive. And so I think that Black queer feminist lens is like very, very integral to like a politic that's gonna address the true challenges that are brought on by a white male power structure. Some of the things that Barbara mentioned that were like missing from their movement, we're able to answer that question with Black queer feminism. For example, we started a campaign, the Chicago chapter of BYP 100 started a campaign this year called Honor Her Labor. And originally the focus, it started along with like other cities and states trying to address the Confederate monuments in their areas. And so we chose the Confederate monument that's in the Oakwood Cemetery because it's 46 feet tall, and it's dedicated to like some unnamed soldiers that fought for the Confederacy, and all of these things. Ida B. Wells is also buried in this cemetery, and we couldn't find her gravesite. And so like that alone, right, okay, so with the Black queer feminist lens, right, we started out focusing on this monument. Like, it's so terrible, like there's this big ass Confederate monument in Jesse Owens Cemetery, Ida B. Wells, all these like very prominent black figures that are like important to the legacy of black folks in Chicago and around the country, but we can't find the gravesite of Ida B. Wells. And so the framing around like using a Black queer feminist lens allowed us to like focus on Ida and decenter the problem that is whiteness. And that's really, really, really important. I can't stress that enough. Like, I know we're here to talk about how folks can get involved in different ways in activism. one of the most important things, like, you don't have to be on the front lines, but like your politics can be on the front lines, right? Like your politics can address these things in just like your everyday. And so I think that framing is, I mean, it's important to me. It doesn't have to be something you take away from this, but if it is, right, like challenge yourself. How am I thinking about this in an inclusive way? Yeah. So is that a time up for both of us or just me? Okay, perfect.
No, I get to ask you another question because I used up all my time. So the work of BYP 100 intersects with many other groups of women. And can you tell us a bit about how you're working across communities of women and how that furthers your work?
Yeah, so
Give us examples.
right now, we are also working with organized communities against deportations around ending the gang database and expanding sanctuary in Chicago. And when we first started talking about these questions, my answer was along the lines of like understanding how these issues impact women, right? So in this gang database that the Chicago Police Department has, 75% of the people in this database are men of color. It might even be closer to 80 or 90% in this database are men of color. And we think about how that it impacts the safety of these men, but also like what does that do to their families, to the women or femmes that are like in their lives, that are the caretakers and the nurturers? How do these things impact them when ICE can now has the authority to now raid their home, right? And you've taken one person or one income out of this person's home, out of this neighborhood. But digging deeper into that, right? Like it's also important to know that when I thought about like the organizing spaces that I've been in, they've always been led by women. Despite what y'all might see on the news, right? You get in these rooms and it's women that are leading the work. And I think that like working with OCAD, while we might be talking about like detention and deportations, and a lot of those times, those policies and the things that happen are centered around men, but it's women that are leading the work because when those men are, I guess, taken away from us or taken out of like our space, right? Who has to pick up the slack? It's us. And I think that, I mean, it's always empowering, right, to be around women, but to be around this work, be in this work, whether it was intentional or not, like with other women is also like very, it's important to our movement because we are able to make the connections that men can't.
And that is a wonderful note. Help me thank these women. Thank you so much. So now we have our elected officials. We have State Senator Pamela Althoff from the 32nd District in McHenry County. She serves as Senate Republican Caucus Chair. And we have in conversation with her State Senator Toy Hutchinson, who represents the 40th District, which includes the south suburbs and portions of Kankakee and Grundy counties. Help me thank these wonderful women. And Toy, I believe you have the first question.
I do. Okay. Hey. Look at this sea of beautiful faces. I'm so happy to be in here. This conversation can go on forever and ever and ever and ever because there's so much to say.
10 minutes.
Or 10 minutes. So in my mind, I'm going on forever and ever and ever. Question number one. Pam, can you tell them a little bit about... This is written funny. Can you tell them a little bit about why you became one of my biggest supporters?
Because it's all about joy.
When I first started in Springfield, what kind of pushback you got from your GOP colleagues for that?
And I, too, really glad to be here this morning and see so many faces. And to the men who, kind of came in, God bless you, and congratulations. Iman, not here, wanted to make a comment that I probably am one of the few Republicans in the room, and I, too, am still trying to figure out the Trump administration. So, why? What kind of pushback and why? I entered the General Assembly in 2003 as an appointee, which means I came into the middle of March when 2 months of the session had already occurred. I was the fourth woman in a Senate Republican caucus of 27. Most of the women had been there moving from the House into the Senate and had worked with these guys for 20 years. I was kind of a political outsider. I didn't work my way up through any particular stream, and it wasn't overly welcoming. I was using the bathroom in the hallway for 2 months before anybody told me there was a bathroom in the chamber. So I decided I was never going to let that happen to anybody else who ever came into the General Assembly. Toy joined us in 2009, and I went over to her immediately and said, listen, they're not even going to tell you where the bathroom is. So, hello. And I told her, I said, if you need anything, if you have any questions, come over and ask me. And there are 2 decades between the two of us. I am 20 years older than Toy. And she was a woman who had a similar background. I, too, grew up on the South Side. I was the city clerk of my community. And again, I really wanted women to succeed. I didn't care if she was a Democrat, didn't care if she was black, didn't care about any of that stuff. I wanted younger women to be able to be strong and have a loud voice. And it's funny, my GOP members really didn't pay too much attention because I was like a nothing anyway. So we really formed this tremendous relationship that the women became very jealous of, I think, because, it's hard to find friends in politics, ladies and gentlemen. Truly is. So I think they became a little bit jealous and wanted to be part of that group. The men, on the other hand, had kind of an eyebrow up thinking, what does this mean long term? But in general, after it had evolved, it was kind of accepted, and people would say, if you have an issue and you need assistance on both sides of the aisle, go talk to Toy and Pam. So, thank you. So, Toy, talk with us a bit about what you've had to navigate as a black woman from the south suburbs in Springfield, and also, was it helpful to have the support of a bipartisan group of women?
Okay, so as a black person, you go into rooms and they go, so what do black people think? It is just like, and it happens, or you're in a room, they're like, and so are women okay with this? Like, we're all monolithic. And I used to say, I don't know that I can draw a line down the middle of myself and tell you whether I'm more black or more woman. This is me. This is the package that comes that I'm in. And so there's some lens that come from a racial lens. There's some lens that come from a woman's lens. The interesting thing to me was that I represent a district that, if you've heard anything about gerrymandering, it didn't work for me. I don't have a district that looks like me. If that were the case, I would have picked a whole lot of black people and a whole lot of women, and that's not what I got. I have like a 68% white district, and the southern part is pretty conservative. I have a very conservative Democrat and a Republican as my 2 state reps. So on paper, it doesn't look like I'm supposed to be there. It does not look like, if you were to look at the demographics of my district, it doesn't look like I would be the senator. And I have been now for almost 9 years. So I was blessed in that when I came in, I had 2 incredible women who came in and said, okay, we want to help you. We want to hear. One was Pam. The other one was State Senator Kimberly Lightford. And she had gone, when the time that she was elected, she was 27 years old when she came in. At the time, she was the youngest person ever elected to the Senate. And she was the only woman the only black woman in the caucus. And so there were a lot of things that were happening that weren't very welcoming and open. And she said the same thing Pam said. She said, I went through this enough for both of us, and I'm not gonna let that happen to you. So I ended up being mentored and loved, and I say that seriously, loved by 2 very strong women. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't agree. There's only one person on this earth who I love more than anything else and loves me completely unconditionally, and I don't agree with her all the time. That's my mama. So in politics, across the spectrum, you're not going to agree. I ended up being placed in a situation literally 2 weeks before we impeached a governor. Nobody had ever heard me speak on a microphone. I was appointed. I didn't run a campaign. They didn't know what I sounded like on a microphone. And I remember thinking, do I say something? There was banks of CNN cameras, MSNBC in the gallery, all the sheer number of like outside media in the chamber. And I decided to hit my button so I could speak to the people in my district. And I remember hearing Pam say, "You got up and spoke," and everybody on my side went, "Damn." True. So it's been incredible to be in this situation, because the one thing I tell young women all the time is that it's very difficult to be what you can't see. So you have to see me. You have to see me so that you know at some point I'm not going to be here anymore, and it needs to be you. Okay, question number 3. Pam, you and I have disagreed on a few things. Just a few. Can you share the story about the bill I supported that you couldn't support and how you kept that from derailing? This is actually a funny story because I had a bill she hated. I mean, like, absolutely hated.
And I kept saying that every time I start. I hate that bill. Are you going to call that bill? I hate that bill. Can't you just forget that bill? I hate that bill. And I will tell you, politics has changed. Well, at least some of the work on the floor has changed since we can text, because we now can text each other,
right.
and nobody knows you're talking to the other person. So
Right.
it's really kind of fun. And so every once in a while I would text her and say, "Sit down. Just sit down. Please sit down."
Because
So I
I'm
don't
going to
even-
win the argument.
Yeah,
if I
right,
stand
because she's
up.
going to win. I don't even remember what,
I don't remember what the
issue
bill
was.
was either.
Neither one of us remember.
It wasn't one of those, like, it wasn't like a social bill. It was a technical bill. It had to do something with local government. So it wasn't like a big technical bill. But I do remember.
And it was, and there were expectations.
There were.
Because in General Assembly, if you are the minority spokesperson or the chairman of a committee, you are expected to stand up and talk about the legislation, even if you support it. I like that bill. Or if you're kind of known as an expert, and again, both Tony and I were city clerks. I was a mayor. I did a lot of local government, so I was somewhat expected to stand up
Right.
and talk about those issues.
So if I have a bill that she doesn't like, and they all knew that we were really good friends, folks were waiting to see, was she going to stand up and go like, "Will the sponsor yield?"
I think they were
on this
taking
bill?
bets. I really do. I think
it was funny.
And so expectation of me standing up and saying, "Ooh, bad bill," and the kind of wait to see, was she going to be nasty? Was she going to not even stand up? Was she going to stand up and go, "It's okay, Toy, just sit down"? So it was kind of fun. So what I chose to do is I stood up and said, with all due respect to the sponsor, who I love more than I hate this bill. And then kind of went into my iteration on why I thought it was a bad bill. But I got rid of all the personal stuff first and the expectations that I really couldn't stand up and talk about an issue without making that issue about that person. Because it isn't, right? It isn't.
Right.
So, and we have evolved, I think. Some of the debate
things.
has gotten a lot less personal. Which I like to take some
lead
credit.
seriously in the chamber, because it is a very toxic environment right now, and I do think there's something unique to the way we come to the process. Because if I know you, and I know how long it takes you to get to the Capitol, and I know who just got diagnosed with cancer, and I know whose grandbabies were just born, and I know why you decided to run for office, and I know. We went on a trip. My mother got close with Pam, too, and was like, "Please take care of her." And Pam said, "Okay." If I know those things, then when I disagree with you, I can't stand up and call you a liar and un-American because I disagree with you. It just means I have to work harder to convince you that I'm right.
and that's one of the only things, if we leave today, is I heard that through all the presentations. We have to learn to talk to each other. We have to dialogue and shut up long enough to hear the opinion of the other person so that we understand what it is we're learning and what it is we want to change. So hopefully you're going to see some of that in politics too.
Hopefully.
But long story short is, it ended up that it was a bipartisan vote, and my side voted no, and her side had voted yes, and it passed. So there it was.
And we met, afterwards and got our customary glass of wine after it was all over. It was, this is a, politically speaking, and I'll just say this because I know time's up, but I want to say, things feel very heavy right now. Things feel very toxic right now. Things feel like there's so many things we have to work on. What do you get to first, and how do you protect your heart and your gut in the middle of this? And it may get a little worse before it gets better. But this is worth it. It's worth it. And the extreme partisanship and the hyperbole and the personal attacks, like spending 5.5 months with my name, the only one, on a tax increase bill. You know, they didn't just want me dead. I wanted me raped and dead, or get the noose out to clean out Springfield. Death threats directly to your phone. This environment is one that makes it so that for people like us, you might think, you know, I can raise my kids, I can vote the way I need to vote, but I don't need to subject myself to this. And I'm begging you, I am begging you, if there's anybody in here who is interested in running for office, please use your voice, because when your voice isn't in the conversation is not complete. We need you to not be afraid of it. Run for something.
So I'm gonna just move on, cause we're gonna. I want you two to get a podcast. Don't they need a podcast?
You know what? We've talked about doing that. Very
yes,
good.
we need to
Nice.
hear more of this, and the nation and the state need to hear far more of this. So thank you to these wonderful women. So, okay, so we're gonna now have a few minutes, and actually I'll bring some mics over to you all for some questions of our panelists. I'm going to put these mics over on this table so that they can stand and when there are questions for them. So I see a hand here, and I will come. We're going to use mics so that CAN TV can get the comments. So
it isn't really a question. I have a name for your podcast. Debate is not about hate.
very good. We like that. We like that. Okay, do you have questions for any of these wonderful speakers? And actually, I'm doing this wrong. Celia and Abby, you can take one of these mics and run it around to the people asking the questions. Where was the hand I saw here? Hi.
Thank you. Hello. This is a question for Rabbi Shoshana and Iman. Iman, excuse me, thank you. It really bothers me. I'm a Jew, and I'm lucky to be part of an egalitarian Jewish community, and it really bothers me that many conservative and Orthodox communities practice it in what I see as a patriarchal way, like they wouldn't accept a woman rabbi, or they don't invite women to read from the Torah. And I was wondering whether you two think that we should accept the way that these people practice our religions, or whether we have the responsibility to push equality into all spaces.
Well, thanks for the easy question.
Stand when you're answering your question. Yeah, easy question.
Love that.
Well, and we won't make you come back to the stage, but just stand so people can see you.
So I will say that I had the incredible honor in Israel to study with Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz. So this is somebody who is an Orthodox Jew, who actually was the first female ordained as clergy in the Orthodox movement. So Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz actually took her cues mainly as far as being able to see a path toward leadership through seeing women rabbis. And so I couldn't agree more with this idea of sometimes you have to stand up in order to be seen. And then once you're seen, I feel like then you're paving a way of other people to be seen as well. And so for me, I feel like I am very authentic in where I feel like I can make change in my community. And then I need to then seed that ability and then be able to allow others to then blaze their paths forward, and for me to do everything I can to support their success.
Great. Other questions? Let's see the hands. Looks like there's...
Hold
oh,
on.
sorry. Iman,
Sorry.
please.
I wanted to just
and then we'll
answer
go back
from the
there next.
Muslim
Thank you.
perspective.
Thank
So
you.
Short answer is no. I think we should.
Hold
push
the
back.
mic up closer.
I think we should push back on these things. I was very, I was honored to be the 5th woman to address the Women's Mosque of America 2 Mays ago. And that was an extraordinary experience. I've always pushed against women-only spaces because I was like, why? We have to be all together. But then once I saw how safe it was. I've suddenly become so obsessed with safe spaces, and some of these spaces, just me using His for God was triggering for some of these women, and so that was an experience for me. The other thing is that sometimes people say no, like, oh, you can't do this just because, and I wanted to say that my cousins recently got married, and they wanted me to marry them. And that was like huge because my whole family would have been against it. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it. But even in that, I consulted with my female scholars and other people, and I totally could have done it and legitly married them. And we just need to push in that direction.
Okay, back in the back. Thank you.
Hi, my question is for the senators. Yes, I was wondering if you saw the article in the Tribune this morning it was by Monique Garcia that said that Governor Rauner is going to be cutting $89 million from the new budget that would be cut from social service programs and providers. And this is on the heels of what was termed by Chicago Police Board President Lori Lightfoot as robbing the social service providers of their ability to help people in the state of Illinois over the last 2 years of the state budget impasse. And what can people like myself, who works for a social service provider, domestic violence provider in particular, which was especially decimated across the state, how can we make sure that people are aware that this only increases violence across all spectrums, not just for the women in their home or any particular situation?
So when I was talking about if your voice is not a part of the conversation, it's incomplete, this is a primary example of what that means. When we were in the middle of the budget impasse, I used to try to describe it as we cannot allow people to talk about numbers on a spreadsheet as though they're just ambiguous numbers on a spreadsheet. Each one of those numbers is a life. And over the last 10 to 15 years, the social services, our entire social safety net has taken the brunt of all the cuts. So we heard a lot about they didn't do any cuts. There's no cuts. There's no cuts. It's like if you operate in this arena, you know damn well where those cuts have been, and you know exactly how difficult it's been to continue to serve who you can serve. You can't even get to building capacity at that point because it was shattered. So this is going to be another fight because the thing that I say all the time is that most people don't understand how government works. We don't talk about it. It's very easy to be upset and angry about government when you don't know how it works. So the three co-equal branches of government, the legislative branch appropriates, and we appropriated dollar amounts that are higher than what it is he's going to spend. The spending is under the purview of the executive branch. So elections have consequences. So what you can do is to make sure that you tell your story and you tell your story loudly. It's one thing to say we're going to reduce the prison population by 20% over a certain amount of time and then decimate every single organization that works to do that on the ground. You can't have it both ways. So in this environment right now where, again, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of din, and sometimes it's hard to see where you can kind of break through that noise. Because we also live in a time where if I say something that someone disagrees with, it's because I'm a Democrat. It's not because I may have a legitimate point. It's because we view everything through a partisan lens. And one of the ways that I try to work towards that in this entire impasse, because I chair revenue, it's the money that comes into the state. You don't get a budget without knowing where this money comes from, how we use it, then what happens to it when you appropriate it, is to tell people that when I'm arguing about these service providers, when you come into an agency, nobody asks you if you're a Democrat or a Republican. If you call and you say, I'm hurt, I need help, I don't know where else I can go, they don't ask you whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. If you say, my child needs services and assistance, and there's this circle that needs to go around them, like if you save one woman from domestic violence, she probably needs job training, her kids probably need counseling. There's a number of different things that happen all the way around that. Nothing exists in a silo by itself. So you have to be loud. You have to be loud. Because none of this stuff works without each other. Without you on the ground, and us appropriating, and somebody's spending, make sure that stuff hits on the thing. It's like you one barrier pops up, you kill that one, and the next one pops up, and then you kill that one, and the next one pops up. Because at this point, we all need to be manning our battle stations. I can't be everywhere. You can't be everywhere. You need me to do the best I can where I am. You guys keep doing what you're doing, but you have to be loud, because each one of those numbers on that spreadsheet represents a life, something that we say is a priority that we're supposed to be spending money on. So either we believe this or we don't believe it, and you have to fight for it, and you have to be loud.
And I'm going to be the practical one of the group because I'm the old one. I concur. You have to understand how the budget works. We have very little discretion when it comes to what it is that our core services are with regard to government, what you need to take care of. It is unfortunate human services is not part of one of our core services, even though it's the right thing to do. We have been talking, I, by the way, am the minority chairperson on revenue, so we work very collaboratively. But I've been barking for years, and this is what I am telling you. You can't just stand up and say you must do. You must also have a solution, or at least an idea of a solution. We have been working for years, and the comment is the state of Illinois needs to identify a revenue stream for human services, period. That money goes to provide those services. You get to choose what they are, but they have to have revenue allocated for them. It isn't the crumbs that's left over after you spend all the money you're supposed to, because that's what government does. So my comment is, not only do you need to stand up and give courage and power to the people you elect and say we will stand behind you when all of the other people come out of the woodwork and say what you're doing is wrong, we're going to help you find a solution which makes sense for everybody who lives and works in this state. And so, you know, you have to have both. You have to have passion, but you also have to have a glimmer of an idea of how to get to where we're going to go.
Thank you. Thank you. One or two more questions. Well, let's see.
I have a question.
Hang on. Okay, that's over here. Okay, we'll do this one here, and then I feel like we haven't done much back. There's a lot of questions. We are not going to have time for all of these questions, but we will get as many as we can. So please try to ask a question, and I'm going to encourage my speakers to give a brief response, even though we do want to be heard. Yes, please.
My question is addressed to any of the speakers and to all of us. No distinction between speaker and audience. And my statement has to do with, how do we activate our power? Because what I have learned, I've been here in America for 60 years. I'm 75 years old. What I learned is, as you speak, the first thing to do is to speak. If you don't speak up, your ideas will not be heard. And most people are so afraid to speak up. When I was in graduate school, I sat in the back of the room together with a black South African classmate. So first to speak, and then to be aware that you have to bring the whole group with you, your community. You cannot speak up just for your self-interest. You have to bring the whole community with you. So I really ask, when you enjoin us to run for office, we could probably just start with, how do we bring ourselves to speak up in whatever community we are in?
So I'm going to ask Alex to say a little bit, because Alex is...
I'm not asking whoever wants to answer. Yes.
Yeah, great. But I'm going to pick on Alex because she's sitting quietly at the table, but she's a journalist and a writer. So I want you to say a little bit about how you would respond to that question.
The thing that stuck out to me about your questions, like one of the first questions you asked was like, how do we activate our power? Like, how do we like sort of get to that point, right? Where we feel empowered. And I think in terms of activation, we just have to take it. I really believe we're at a point right now where we just have to take our power. I don't know if everybody is familiar, like with Rahm's budget address yesterday. It was closed off to the public. You had to have a special invite for a city budget. And he wants to run again, which is nuts to me. And that's my personal opinion. But I just... we're at a point right now where like the urgency is unmatched. I really feel like we can't wait. We're really at a point where we have to take back our power, and not in multiple ways. Like, so for one, right, like I got a degree in journalism, but I started really writing about like Black radical politics and like Black liberation because I had a daughter. And that was like coming off of years of like on-campus Black student organizing. And then I had my daughter, and I couldn't get arrested. So I have a responsibility. And so I had to figure out like, how do I like take my power and like use that in another way? And writing was a way that I found like I could activate myself. And I was also activating the people around me. I would get comments from like my friends like, oh, I read what you wrote and I had no idea about this thing, right? So like, what conversations are you having in your circles with your friends or people that are not even your friends? I have conversations about police abolition at work because I feel like this is who I am and these are important to my politics, and I'm gonna carry my politics with me no matter where I go. And that's important too, right? Like, are you carrying your politics with you no matter where you go and like who you talk with? That's how I would answer that question.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna get Sunny, and I'm gonna get one more, and then I'm gonna let everyone talk to each other.
This question is for Barbara and for Alex. I'm wondering how you feel men can be involved, especially in the anti-violence movement. I know Barbara was one of the first people to speak on that issue years ago, and it's getting a little better, maybe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sunny. Yeah. I think one of the critiques I have of our movement in the beginning is that we really created woman-only spaces to feel comfortable and to feel our power. And because we are pissed, let's be honest. But I feel, and I've learned since, how critically important it is, because many of us have been talking about these things for 45 years, but we haven't changed the amount of violence. We haven't been able to do that. And I think that men have a particular both ability and responsibility to talk to the men and the boys in their lives, to be fathers in a different way, to be coworkers, to even have the gumption to challenge bosses. Because otherwise we end up with what we have, which is a president who's a predator in chief. And one of the things that I've seen is that there are more and more men who realize that the kind of privilege and power to abuse is not what they want in their lives. They want mutuality. They want to be a good father. They want to be a good partner. And I'm hopeful, because even though it's a minuscule amount of men, there are more and more men, and there are groups who are trying to work with coaches, for instance, who have impact. And right now, with the Colin, what's his name? Kaepernick. I mean, there's an example of men speaking out on something incredibly important, a critique of this country, and doing it with bravery and grace. And I want to see them do that around violence against women too, and some of them are. But I feel like there's this hopeful moment because men are realizing the power of their voice to impact each other, because women have been yelling at men about the violence for a long time, and unfortunately, it hasn't stopped the violence. I think when men do it, it's going to have a ripple and powerful effect that I'm waiting for.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do one last question here, and then we're going to have, you will have a chance to ask the people at your table your question. Please stand.
Hi, this is a question for the senators. So, given that our current political climate, I think, is disproportionately apathetic and hostile towards women, what do you think are the most effective ways to catalyze more women into politics?
And I would ask you to share 1 or 2 bullet points. Because you are political representatives.
I'll give one and let Troy truly think about it. She's a much more thoughtful speaker than I am. I think women need to collaborate and support each other. I think every woman who chooses to go into whatever field that is, but particularly in politics, you have got to have a support group. You have got to have people that you trust. So before you do that, come up with that core group of women, not excluding men, but I think you need a core group of women where you bounce ideas off of them, they support you, they comfort you when it really gets ugly. You have to have that, and then you can, then you can find your bravery and your courage.
I'd say get involved. Find a campaign or something to work on so you can see the mechanics of it, because there's nothing better than to see it, and everything that goes into it. Like, how do you communicate? How do you raise money? Women tend to be, data shows that women run for office after we're asked to. So guys walk in like, I am the best and I am the next, and that's why I'm going to be the next. That's what they just walk in and go do it. And we sometimes with better credentials and more schooling and more experience, will still go, I don't know, what's going to do with my kids? How am I going to raise the money? We tend to wait to be asked. And so there is a piece of that, like if you're curious about it, get it, and you just do it at a school board race, a library board race. People don't realize how many contracts and things and money decisions are made on school boards. So it's like, I know there's a lot of people, there may be some people here who don't live in Chicago. There's not an elected school board in Chicago. But if you live someplace else.
You can be on local school council, as I was. You'll learn a lot.
Yeah. Get involved in something that you're curious about. Simple thing. Jan Schakowsky tells a story about she got sick of going to the grocery store and coming home with food that was spoiled because there was no dates stamped. Like now we take all that for granted. When you go to a store like sell-by dates, that didn't exist. So she and a group of women got together to lobby. Their folks like, I shouldn't come home and realize in 2 days that this milk is spoiled. I couldn't even imagine that. I'm 44 years old. All my life, there's been sell-by dates on things that I've been aware of. But when we see an issue that we want to change, then we go figure out how to change it. This is a street that I live on. People are walking really fast down that street. There should be a stop sign there. How do I get a stop sign there? So just get involved locally where you are to figure out how that works. You'll be inspired. It bites you. You'll be inspired.
All right. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to just take a few minutes, and what I'd like you to do is you're going to turn to someone at your table, and because we don't have enough time for you to go all the way around the table, but you're going to turn to someone at your table, and I would like you to take a couple of minutes, each person, sharing with them any thoughts you have about how you want to be active or you want to increase your activism. So our board chair, Pat Slovak, is going to make her way to the front of the room to help me close us out. But I guess in closing, I would just say, so I hope you're taking away the sense that there is not a right or wrong way to do this. There are many, many roads to activism, and all of them have value, and most of them come down to the relationships that we build. And we need to build some relationships with different kinds of people. For instance, I don't tend to hang out with partners from major corporate law firms. But I have been fortunate enough on the staff of CFW to get the opportunity to work with folks like Pat, our board chair. So I wanted her to just say briefly how she came to CFW, lest you think that you can only do this if you work in nonprofits and arts and community organizations.
Thanks, Alicia. Nothing like stealing the way I was going to open this was by saying, I have to confess I am a private lawyer. I've practiced in private law firms my entire career. And despite that, it actually isn't all that strange that I've gotten involved in CFW, although Alicia doesn't really believe me. I have to say that when I started practicing law, women were not very present in my world. And in fact, I was the first woman partner in the firm I was in at that time in New York. And if that wasn't hard enough for them, then I had a baby and they really did not know what to do with me then. So I really, at that level, got involved in women's issues in the law. And I was very active in those for many years through bar associations and women networking groups, et cetera. When I came back to Chicago, I still was very active in women lawyers' causes, and equity for women in the law had always been a really important issue for me. And then someone invited me to a CFW luncheon. And it was like this light bulb went off, and I realized that there were so many parts of this puzzle, and that if we didn't have equity for women and girls at every level, not just in my law firms, we were none of us going to succeed. And so it's been so easy to be part of this organization because the mission is so true, and it's so important for our success as a whole, men and women, that we all move together through this process. So I haven't left the issue of equity for women in the law, but I've certainly broadened it, and I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you, Pat. Can someone tell me what time it is? 10:49. Okay, so here's a couple of closing words. Any couple of thoughts of takeaway, highlight, something that you liked? Let's just shout them out. The senators. I will repeat so that it gets recorded for CAN-TV. The rabbi and Iman. Alex. Barbara. You don't have to be on the front lines, but your politics can be on the front lines. All of you. We need to listen to each other. Right here, you were going to say? Okay, now that was good enough. I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to let you say it. You just said that perfectly. Here, stand up and say that again.
Hello, everyone. I'm on TV, okay. If your voice is not part of the conversation is not complete.
All right. Well, I think that's the right note to end on. So let me thank all of our wonderful speakers again, these fabulous speakers, and thank our sponsors, Lenovo Foundation, Field Foundation of Illinois again, and most importantly, thank all of you